Well, good evening, everyone. I see some familiar faces and some not so familiar faces. I almost said some old faces, but some of you might then decide to opt out, so I don't, well, I'll not say that, although I think I've said it. Anyway, it's good to be with you tonight. And sometimes when you plan these things, not too long after the last one, you might think, what am I going to talk about next time? Actually, there's so much to talk about that it's hard to see how we can get through what we've already got without rushing and also giving you time for questions. So we're going to try and get through this main part of the presentation in about an hour. I'll be talking first on three projects. Then Sonia, whom some of you know, I've not seen her around yet. Well, maybe she's around somewhere. We'll chase her up. Hopefully she'll be singing to us halfway through, and then Mark will tell you about some other projects. As he said, Abigail, if you want to send a message with a question, you can send it in the chat. But at the end, we'll hopefully be hanging on for a while. If it's not past your Ovaltine time, you'll be able to stay and ask us a few questions. But I think now we'll go straight in, if I can get this to do, straight into the slides, and we'll talk our way through. If you've got questions, chat them to Abigail or take a note of them and ask us at the end. Okay, I'm assuming you can all now see a picture of Burkina Faso, and this is what we call the Blind Centre. First of all, I mentioned the lady in the green outfit on the right is Christine. Christine came to England first of all to learn English in 1996, and met a few people that she's kept up with over the years, including Stephen Gillam. In fact, if you know Stephen Gillam, Christine is very, very involved with Stephen Gillam and working with him in Bible education services, as well as having 3 children, as well as having a full-time job with Plan International, as well as being our field manager. I don't think she ever sleeps. Recently got a WhatsApp from her at 11 at night, another one from her at 2:30 in the morning, and another one at 6 in the morning. She spends so much time working for us and doing so much. She's a very spiritual lady as well. This photograph is at a centre for the blind, about 60 miles west of the capital, near a place called Koudagou, and we were taken there to have a look at this place because they wanted a well. We went there under a degree of protest, actually, because there's only about 30 or 35 people at this blind centre. And one of our criteria for putting a well in is that we want to benefit as many people as possible. And that would usually be 700 or 800. So how could we ever think about providing a well for just 30 people? But being there was just incredibly emotional. The lady there in the center of the picture in the blue, she was the lady who ran the place. And really it's a picture of poverty and deprivation and physical suffering. But they're Christians. And that makes you have a little bit sense of special responsibility toward them. But how could you possibly spend £5,000 in water for just 30 people when you've got another place down the road with maybe 2,000 people? So when I wrote up my diary after last year's trip, was it last year or was it this year? This year's trip. I mentioned this place and I said, very, very sadly, Myra's Wells cannot justify putting a well in this place for so few people. But then somebody who got this diary read it and said, what if we pay for that well? Would you put it in? Well, of course we would. And just a couple of weeks ago, we did. So the first few pictures are about this place, and I'll try to run through them quite quickly just for the sake of time. And again, if you've got questions, you can put them to us as you go along or at the end. Some of the people at this blind centre, again, it just shows that there's sadness in their faces. It's not always the case. Usually in Africa, you get smiles and happiness. Here, there was a tremendous atmosphere of sadness. Apart from the veranda area that you just saw, this was the only other room in the place. It doubled as a storeroom, a bedroom, a conference room if it was raining, and anything else. This is the only other accommodation they had. This is their pre-existing well. This is the well that's no longer necessary that they were getting water from. It wasn't very deep and the water wasn't very clean. And here's the lady that you saw before drawing some water with that rope. And here's what she got. And that is the water they would use for cooking, drinking, and anything else that they needed water for. It really was heartbreaking to see it. This was the kitchen area. Outside, of course, if you look carefully, you'll see the fire under the pot. And so there'll be a few vegetables in there. You've got some cooking fat in a Coke can at the side, if your eyesight's good. The whole thing was just not 21st century, never mind 20th century. Now this slide is a bit out of sequence. I just put this slide here to illustrate the point that something like, Mark may correct me with a nod or a shake of his head if I'm wrong, but I think maybe something like 40% of our wells are now paid for by one person in memory of something. It might be a memory of a spouse. It could even be in memory of a child. That's happened in several occasions. Or it could be to celebrate a happier occasion, like a wedding. So just think about that. If there's somewhere you want to have something as a sort of lasting memorial, that means that your wealth is actually being used in God's service in a different place, that's one way to go about it. So we now come on to what's happened at the Blind Centre since then. In fact, this just happened in the past few weeks. We drill a well. Normally, a well will produce maybe 1,000, 1,500, 200 litres per hour. But sometimes wells produce much more than that. And we'll be hearing later about one that's produced a hugely amount more. But this one, I think, is about 5,000 or 6,000 an hour. So what can we do? These people don't need 5,000 or 6,000 litres an hour. So what we did, we built a water tower to which the local people contributed some of the cost, and we put on top of that water tower a 2,500 litre plastic tank. You'll see it in a minute. So that the people can actually have the water. It's pumped up into the tank by means of a solar-powered pump, and they get loads of sunshine there. And then the people can just get the water from a tap, which is 10 times easier than pumping it. So that's how they get the water in the Blind Centre now. And they're also able to supply water for the neighbourhood also. And I think they'll get some money from the neighbourhood for that. Another one just showing a couple of people at the well, another one of the water tower and the shelter up above, and so we go on. I say that one has just been completed, and so we haven't got that many pictures of it. But next time we'll have more. So move on now to what we call Simon's Well. Now, there may be some people who are with us tonight who, certainly if you're in the local Bournemouth area, or maybe even if you're in Scotland, you'll know a couple called Sheena and Simon Damon. And they had two boys, so they had two boys, Simon and Timothy. Simon was married with a young lad, and about 2.5 years ago, he was discovered to have cancer and a brain tumour. And we prayed for his recovery. That didn't happen in God's wisdom, and Simon passed away. And Sheena was determined that she wanted to provide a well in his memory at a school in Burkina Faso. And so she set about raising the £5,000 to actually make this well a reality. Now, she hasn't got the £5,000 yet. I think she's probably somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000. But we went ahead with it anyway, and Sheena's still working to raise the rest of the money. But in that sort of situation, the well will top it up from its general fund. We got the plaque, and that well has now been drilled. You won't see much about. I won't tell you much about this form. You won't see too much. But there's a 4-page form that we ask a village to fill in if they want a well, where we ask them all the relevant questions, because what we want to do most of all, is to put a well where it is most needed. The primary purpose of Myra's wells is to provide water. The very important secondary purpose is to share the gospel via the well, to provide physical water, but also to tell people where they can get the living water. And so we concentrate first of all on the need for physical water. So we'll ask them how many people there are, where they're located, where the nearest water supply is, what the particular problems in the village are, and then we'll try to make sure that we make decisions as to where the wells go with the greatest wisdom. Now this one is getting the water. We use a drill, obviously, to go down, and when it gets down to a certain point, hopefully we'll get water. In that case, it looks unusually clean. Sometimes when it first comes up, it's not clean because it's come through all sorts of other material. That one looks quite clean. When we put a well in, we'll also put in a sort of compound, a concrete structure, so that people can come along and they can bring along their laundry. They can do all sorts of things in there, but they have to keep that area clean. The pump is in the middle. There'll be a committee of people who we call the well committee, and they will look after the maintenance of the well, collect a little bit of money to keep a little pot for repairs, make sure it's available to anyone who wants water. They're not allowed to lock the well up. So that well committee is very important to us. And in this case, again, it's only a couple of weeks ago. They've had the well for a little while, but they've just put the plaque on, just on that, the day the photograph was being taken. And that's in a place called Ramongo, not actually very far from the Blind Centre. The one thing strange about that picture is you've got males actually operating the pump. Normally, normal circumstances, it will be women and also children who would be pumping away. And the men have got more important things to do, like make big decisions somewhere. So that is, again, a very recent well. So we haven't got that much variety of pictures to show you, but just accept to say that it's working and it's in memory of Simon. Normally we'll take these drills out into where they are and try and do 2 or 3 wells in the same locality. Okay, and again, that's Simon's well. Now, the third one I want to mention is a well that has got the name Awesome Adam. Some of you may have heard about Adam. Adam is a Scot, that's the first thing. But he was at school, his father's in the Air Force, he was at school down where I live in Westmoors, and he heard, when I was doing a school assembly about Myra's wells, about the need. And he decided he would walk, I think it was about 28 kilometres, 25 or 28 kilometres along an old railway line down here to try and raise money for a well. And he raised £1,110, but subsequent to that, other people added to it, so we're able to provide a well. And that well was drilled in a place called Natiera. This is the well at the previous well at Natiera. And one of the interesting things here is, in many of these pictures, you'll notice that whilst there's churches in a lot of these places, there's also a mosque. But very rarely in the villages where we go do we see any animosity between the different religions. In fact, many of the Muslims are quite receptive to the gospel, and not a few Christians. And this is an old well. In the area you can see how primitive it is, a piece of rope, a container, and that rope is held in place by that old tree trunk across the well. Again, just to look at the state of the vehicles and the trolleys that they're bringing to this place to collect water, it's unbelievable. This is an old well, some sort of primitive design. But if you think it takes at least 5 minutes to fill one of these containers, how is that lorry going to be there? How long will people have to wait to get water? When we start the drilling, of course, it's a little bit different each place, and the drillers will keep a sample of what it is that they're going through. On the left, it looks like something near the surface. It's just sort of sand. As you get down, you'll get different materials. And they get an idea as they're going through these materials what the likelihood of success is if they carry on drilling. Another view of Adam's well. Obviously, that's when it's just been put together, I would suggest, and they're just showing the people how to operate it. And some of these people around the well, some of the old men will be maybe the village chief, and various others, maybe the church pastor, come to be part of the event. And then the ladies, of course, are the ones who come and do the pumping. And we're not quite sure what's happening here. It's possibly one of the technicians explaining to one of the local people how to do some basic maintenance, because they do have to do maintenance from time to time. But the breakdown rate is very, very rare, as long as they're properly looked after and greased occasionally. Interestingly, in the background, you can't really see it properly. You can get an idea of the primitive state of construction in this place. So that's Adam's Well with some of the houses around about. Slight point of not real much importance but interest. On the right-hand side, this place has no electricity. Electricity will be maybe 50 miles away. But on the right-hand side, you'll see a little solar-powered light on it. So they'll have that around the well also. Again, some of the men at the village. This is something that's just been sent to us from Myra. The guy on the right, I would judge is the pastor, because he's got his coat on with the initials AD, which is Assembly de Dieu, or Assemblies of God in our language. And there's the well again. Now, interestingly here, something else happened to tell you about here. I got an email from Christine, and Christine told me about this place, Myra, how there was a school only for infants. There was a lot of children in it. And once they got to 8 or 9, there was nothing. And what was actually happening because of that, there's no education, no one to look after the children, was that girls were getting pregnant at 12 and 13 and 14, to lads that were maybe 15, 16 and 17, and the whole society was just in a terrible state morally. And Christian said, if we could get a Christian school in this village associated with the church, then all this could change. And she told us that to build a school would cost something like £50,000 to have it all the years from sort of 7 up to 15. Well, that's not the business that Myra's Wells are in. Myra's Wells are in the business of wells. But we asked her, how much do you need to have to get some classrooms up and running and get going? And she came back with a price to get 4 classrooms built, plus some toilets and a perimeter wall. And she said that would be about £20,000 for these 4 classrooms. So that information was made available to us. And what is remarkable, what has happened remarkably so far, is that we've had two people offer to provide the finance for these 4 classrooms and the toilets, a total of coming to something like £25,000, £26,000. And that money has just gone out, and they're going to start building the school next week. Regulations, in fact, the local council have donated 4 hectares of land for this school. So the school will start being built probably next week, which is quite amazing. And hopefully, by the time that is built, then more money will become available for the rest of the school. The local church in Ouagadougou, the main churches in Ouagadougou, they're also going to provide some of the finance for the remainder. So maybe if you're interested in that, we'll give you more information. But it's not the Myra's Wells project, updating it, but it's not where money would go to that's given to Myra's Wells. This is the existing small school in Myra, and then compared with some, it's not too bad. It's got a concrete wall, and the shutters, it looks like it's got a corrugated iron roof. So it's not the most basic that we've seen. So that'll be the pattern that it's being built to. And again, these next 2 or 3 are just ones that have come today. Just to let you an idea of what school is like in Burkina Faso, just 3 or 4 pictures. This one is just, we sent out with someone who went out recently, a whole lot of toothpaste. And so the Christian has been given the toothpaste out at the school that she runs in Ouagadougou. Here, these little ones have got toothbrushes, and here, these ones have got pencils. I don't know if anybody will have the time to count how many children there are in that class, but we reckon there's at least 100, and we can't even see the right-hand side. That's what school is like in Burkina Faso. That is a Christian school. As it's a private school, this is a school at Zongo, the parents have to pay to send their children there. And just looking at this, it looks as though the cost for the year is about 22,000 CFA, West African francs. In our money, that would be, I think, about £30 for the year. And this child has paid a certain amount, and she's got 10,000 still to pay. So that's what it costs to send a child to school for a year. Would be about £30. Something we might think about when we think about this school in Atira later on. And this little girl here, this is the girl that the receipt you've just seen refers to in Zongo School.
Yeah, that's good. So I want to take you on a little trip round towards the southeast of Burkina Faso. And in the course of this, we're going to just talk a little bit about some of the wells which have been built recently. In fact, really the most recent wells that have been drilled. And then after that, I want to take you to the west and the southwest of Burkina Faso and talk about the wells which are currently planned, and we trust in the will of the Lord will be drilled over the next few weeks. So first of all, round to the southeast of Burkina Faso, and just to draw your attention on the map to where Ed has been talking about. Ed has been talking about one down in the southwest between two towns called Banfora and Bobo Dioulasso. Bobo is the second city in Burkina Faso and would be, I suppose, about as big as the Bournemouth Pool Christchurch conurbation. But there's nowhere else apart from that which is anywhere near that size. Banfora, I think, is about 100,000 people. The place where Eddie was talking about, Natiera, where the school is going to be built just there between Banfora and Bobo, and then Romongo and the Blind Centre are both near to a place called Koudougou, which is about 100 kilometres, 60 miles to the west of Ouagadougou. But where I want to take you at the moment is down towards a town called Tenkodogo, which is about 200 kilometres, maybe 120 miles from Ouagadougou, and particularly to a little village called Bantugri there. This is a request that we received a little while ago. I think it was about this time last year, maybe January, and we had a look at it and decided that really this was one which was worth having a well for itself. You'll notice that on this is the form which we use. Eddie showed you the first page, this is the second page. And they've said that they've got a forage. Now, forage is a French word because the lingua franca is French. Out in Burkina Faso, it used to be a French colony. And forager is the French verb to drill, to bore. And so they call their wells, the proper drilled ones, they call them forage. And actually, it's not that far from the village as where things go. 2 kilometres isn't that far away. We are going to look at some later on, which are much further away than that. But you notice that there's 100 minutes of waiting time, nearly 2 hours. And it means that once they've walked out to this well, then very often they're going to have to wait 100 minutes, 2 hours before they're going to get their turn to use it. And the same applies to that second well. That was the first place they would go to. The second place they would go to, this place Yasin. And again, they will have to wait nearly 2 hours before they get their turn there. So we decided that that would be quite a good place to go and put a well. And we had some pictures. This is the village in the background, your fairly typical village when you're at that sort of distance away from Ouagadougou. And two ladies and that lovely little girl there. That's the well which they're using at the moment. And I don't know how it makes you feel. But it makes me feel pretty uncomfortable just looking down it. Those open wells are very often about 20 meters deep, and very often they've been dug by hand at the risk of the well caving in while it's being dug. This one is pretty good because it's got a concrete lining, brick lining, which means that the water does keep relatively clean, although of course it's only rainwater that is going to be in there. This is a little video which I want to play. And notice this lady closest to us with the white yellow band. She's got her water, and if you watch very carefully, you'll see that there's almost no water. In fact, it's our friend Michelle who's calling out there, "Ne pas d'eau," no water. And so we decided that was a pretty good place to go and put a well. We also found that we got a request from a place called Kudmi, which is not quite out as far as Tenkodogo, but it's on the main road. There are a number of main roads in Burkina Faso, but inevitably you go along a main road for quite a long time. It's not exactly the M1. You don't get up to speeds of 70 miles an hour for more than about 10 yards before you find speed humps along it. But you go along a main road and then inevitably you have to turn off the main road and go 20 kilometers or so out onto the dirt roads, and that's where this place Kudmi was about 100 kilometers along the road, the main road that you have to go to get to Bantugri. So we said, let's do this one as well, and you'll notice that this one has got a pump, so that's pretty good. It's 2 kilometers away, which is not too bad in terms of Burkina Faso, but the French there tells us that that pump is only available to the pupils at the school and the teaching staff. And it means that the people of the village really are not able to use that well. They've got to go somewhere else before they can get their water. So we had another request, and this is also from Christine. And in fact, we had this about 2 years ago, but we hadn't done anything about it. So when we said to her that we were thinking of going out towards Bantugri and Tenkodogo, she said, how about Sartenga? And we had a look at the form for Sartenga and thought, yes, this is promising. And once again, we've got the usual stories about the wells. Yes, there is a pump there, a kilometre away, which again, in Burkina Faso terms, is very close. But what they're saying about it is this: the pump, well, the people, there's too many people. And most importantly, you have to pay before you can have access to the water. And that means that there's a lot of people there who just won't be able to use that pump. They won't be able to afford to pay for the water which they need. On top of that, you pay for the privilege of using the pump, but you also have to wait for another 2 hours before you're going to be able to use it. The queue will form early in the morning, and the queue will go on certainly throughout the morning session, and again in the evening session. Most people go to the pump twice a day. The second place they can get water, 2 kilometers away. So again, in Burkina Faso terms, that's not too bad, as we'll see later on. But the wait is still 2 hours when you get there. And this French here tells us that there are 10 districts in this big village. And each of those districts will have maybe 50 families, maybe 100 families. This particular district at Sartenga, in fact, has 108 families. And I don't think in sort of mother, father and 2.4 children, it doesn't work quite like that. By a family, what they mean is probably 3 generations, all living in a small compound, and maybe 8, 9, 10 people altogether in the family. I know Eddie tells a story of a time he went to a church once, and there were about 30 or 40 people there, and they said, we're just waiting for one more family to arrive. And when the family arrived, it was about 40 people. So 108 families can be an awful lot of people. And the French again just says that there isn't sufficient water in that district, that quartier, and we haven't got a pump as a source of water. So we decided that Sartenga was a good place to go. And we've had some photographs of Sartenga. Again, this is the typical sort of housing out there. You'll notice that there are those little compounds and there will be families living just in the compound, and then another compound and another family. The little hut there may be a grain store, I suspect that that's a storage unit as well, just to the left of the picture there. This is a school there. You can always recognize a school in Burkina Faso because they all look identical. And this is another little school, a primary school again, and it has 4 classrooms, but there's not really that much water for the pupils there. And this was a picture which was taken at the church at Sartenga, and it was after the morning service there. Oh, by the way, at morning service there, you very often have to be up to be out and ready before 9 o'clock in the morning. I don't think I'd find that very easy myself, but there is the little church there. And I reckon there's about 40 people there, including the children. We decided we're going to put a well there, and we'll tell you the story in a minute, but they have now got a well. And I'm confident, very confident, that through the testimony of God providing that well and the way that's going to help the pastor with his work there, that 40 people will soon be more. Lastly, we wanted to go to a place called Basbedo, also across near Tenkodogo. And so we've got a nice little group of 4 wells, which we want to do all together. I've put that Kudmi in. Now, for anyone who's got a smartphone, you'll probably be very familiar with WhatsApp. WhatsApp is a very useful thing. Wherever you can get a little bit of signal on a phone, then you are able to communicate. Wherever you go in Burkina Faso, the phone coverage, the mobile coverage is very good. I always think it's really quite sad that it's much easier to get a mobile connection in Burkina Faso than it is to get water. But Christine uses WhatsApp a lot now to communicate with us. And I just want to tell you the story of the week beginning, I think it was the 19th of October. Christine was going to make sure that, I'm not sure that that's done now, Christine was going to give us the result of the drilling across there near Tenkodogo. Tuesday, 20th of October, it was just before midday, and we had this message which popped up on WhatsApp. And what it says is, we have got 1,200 litres an hour, or 1.2 square meters cube per hour at Kudmi. And that was, it doesn't matter how many times it happens, that was just a wonderful thing to hear. I've got 1,200 litres at Kudmi. And to put that into context again, Eddie said that really the average flow rate that we get, the amount of water per hour that can be delivered, it is around about 2,000–3,000. This is perfectly adequate and is quite sufficient for the village there at Kudmi. If I can just share one scripture, because in Genesis chapter 26, Abraham had died earlier in the chapter, and Isaac was digging wells. And towards the end of that chapter, the servants came back and told him, we found water. We found water. And you know, that was 4,000 years ago, but it's still the same in places like Burkina Faso, the thrill that water has actually been found and is going to be available. So that was the Tuesday at just before 12 o'clock. The next day, we knew that Christine was going to Sartenga, so we were all eagerly waiting for the outcome. And this message popped up. And again, just to help if your French isn't quite so good, what it tells us is, hello to everyone. God has given us a new well at Sartenga, depth 52 meters, flow rate 16,000 liters per hour. May his name be praised. You remember the previous one was 1,200. This one is 16,000 liters an hour. That is absolutely huge. And in fact, after they cleaned out the borehole, it actually went up to 18,000 litres per hour. The minimum requirement for a well to be good is 700 litres an hour. This is 25 times the size of that. So it's a huge amount of water. And here are the people watching. This must have been about 5:30 in the evening, I think, because the light's beginning to go. And the photographs are taken on old cameras and old smartphones, so they're not always very clear. But can I just mention the little piles of dust in the bottom right-hand corner? That's the dust which the drillers collect as it goes through the layers, and so they can see the progress they're making down towards the bedrock which they have to go to before they come across water. And there is the well sealed, waiting for the pump to be fitted before the drillers went off to the next place. Nice little clip here. It's hot and dirty work when you're drilling wells, and this chap decided that the best way of cooling down and getting cleaned is sit underneath the water coming out of the well. But having that well gave us a real dilemma, because there's a village there which has got 12 districts, quartiers, and that means an awful lot of people. And we've got 18,000 litres of water an hour at our disposal. So what do? Well, we started to think about it, and I think most of us just straight away, we've got to put a water tower there. But the problem with a water tower is that it costs a lot more on top of the wells. We asked around about prices and one thing and another, and we got prices for a tank which was 5,000 litres of storage and a tank which was 10,000 litres of storage, and the cost was absolutely tremendous. And we had to weigh up the balance between providing the tower there or between doing wells elsewhere. And it was in the middle of this that we were really seeking the Lord's will and guidance. And as soon as we started doing that, two unexpected gifts turned up. One was for £5,300 and another was £5,000. And it was just as if the Lord was saying to us, you're going to put a tower there. Well, we still wanted to be absolutely sure, and we asked Christine loads more questions, and she must have got fed up with the emails. I think there were about 200 emails going backwards and forwards. And eventually we did decide that we were going to go with the water tower. We've asked her to put at least 2 taps on it, if not 3. Only yesterday, in fact, we sent Christine the email saying, please put a 10,000 litre tank on there. It's going to cost a lot of money, but we think it's worth it for that village. And we're sure, we've told them to make sure that, that the people at the village understand that it's God's provision of the water, and they're going to have to look after the water there, the well there. Next day, 9 o'clock in the morning, got another message on WhatsApp, and this time it said 62 meters flow rate, 4.25 meters cubed. In other words, 4,250 liters an hour. And this was Bantugri, which was the place we wanted to go to in the first place. We felt so blessed that that week, 3 wells and 3 good wells, and especially that good one at Sartenga. The pipes there are the lining that's going to be put down the well when it's drilled. And again, always a crowd of people watching what is going on when the drilling is going on. As Bedo, we have to wait. The end of the rainy season is in September and it starts to dry up. But unfortunately, Bedo, at the moment, it hasn't dried up enough to be able to send the lorries out to the wells. They can certainly get along the main road, but they wouldn't be able to get to the village from the main road after that. So what next? And I know there was a question asked a minute ago about what are the plans for new wells. Well, Just to put things in context again, we're going to go down to the southwest, to somewhere near the borders with Ivory Coast and Mali down on the west. And we have plans there at 5 wells. I've marked on there 600 kilometers. That border is about 600 kilometers from Ouagadougou. And so it's a long way to send a drill. So we're hoping to send a drill down there and do a batch of about 5 wells. Just to give you an idea of what they're going to be like. This is a place called Kouré, and there's the church and the surrounding district there at Kouré. And at Kouré, there's 1,300 people. Nearest water is at 1 kilometer away, which is a river. Then there's a borehole, which is only 1 kilometer away, but it's owned by a person, an individual, and he won't let people use it. So they will end up going to a borehole 3 kilometers away and with an hour's wait there. Another place, Gbadao, again, 1,300 people, and the nearest water is 1 kilometer away. That's an open well, and that's the picture there of the open well. The second place they go to, also 1 kilometer away, also an open well on the right-hand side. There's a borehole 3 kilometers away, but 2 hours wait when you get there. So you walk for an hour, wait 2 hours, and then come back an hour as well. And that's the water that you get out of the open wells there at Gbadao. We also hope to go later on, perhaps in January, down to a place called Gawa. And we hope at the moment to do 3 wells down there. It may turn out to be more than 3 wells. But one of them is a place that we visited last January, a place called Bakanon. And the people there, 900 people, are relying on it, open well again. There's a little school there which is not too far away, so we do hope that we should be able to get a well which will help them. Here's another place, and these pictures just tell the story really. 800 people and the distances they have to go to get the water. If they want to use a well, a proper well, they've got to walk for over an hour, wait 2 hours, then walk back for over an hour, for over an hour. The water there that you can see is the river, which is again 5 kilometers away. And lastly, there's a borehole 7 kilometers away, again 2-hour wait. And the same at this place. I've said already, I will attempt to pronounce it, Ouagadougou. And again, exactly the same story. River 2 kilometers away, borehole 7 kilometers away, borehole 9 kilometers away, with huge wait times. Those are ones which we had, came to us in about October, I think it was. It may have been a bit earlier than that, but as soon as we saw them, we said, really, those are things which we're going to have to do. And there's finally one more which we want to do, a place called Ouagadougou, also down in that sort of area. And again, the same sort of pictures. We've seen people doing this. And it's just so emotional when you can go back a year later and see a well pump pumping out nice clean water right on their doorsteps. So I think really that is pretty much all I had to say. I don't know how I've done time-wise. Eddie did exceedingly well. I've not done too badly, but I noticed now that Abigail's fielded some questions coming in, so we'll just have a look at those and see if we can answer them